The Greeks or Hellenes are an ethnic group native to Greece, Cyprus, Albania, Turkey, southern Italy, and other regions. They also form a significant diaspora, with Greek communities established around the world. Greek colonies and communities have been historically established on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea and Black Sea, but the Greek people have always been centered on the Aegean and Ionian seas, where the Greek language has been spoken since the Bronze Age. Until the early 20th century, Greeks were distributed between the Greek peninsula, the western coast of Asia Minor, the Black Sea coast, Cappadocia in central Anatolia, Egypt, the Balkans, Cyprus, and Constantinople. Many of these regions coincided to a large extent with the borders of the Byzantine Empire of the late 11th century and the eastern Mediterranean areas of ancient Greek colonization. The cultural centers of the Greeks have included Athens, Thessalonica, Alexandria, Smyrna, and Constantinople at various periods. Most ethnic Greeks live nowadays within the borders of the modern Greek state and Cyprus. The Greek genocide and population exchange between Greece and Turkey nearly ended the 3 millennia-old Greek presence in Asia Minor. Other long-standing Greek populations can be found from southern Italy to the Caucasus and southern Russia and Ukraine, and in the Greek diaspora communities in a number of other countries. Today, most Greeks are officially registered as members of the Greek Orthodox Church. Greeks have greatly influenced and contributed to culture, arts, exploration, literature, philosophy, politics, architecture, music, mathematics, science and technology, business, cuisine, and sports, both historically and contemporarily. History. The Greeks speak the Greek language, which forms its own unique branch within the Indo-European family of languages, the Hellenes. They are part of a group of pre-modern ethnicities described by Anthony D. Smith as an archetypal diaspora people. Origins. The evolution of Proto-Greek should be considered within the context of an early Paleo-Balkan Sprachbund that makes it difficult to delineate exact boundaries between individual languages. The characteristically Greek representation of word initial laryngeals by prothetic vowels is shared, for one, by the Armenian language, which also seems to share some other phonological and morphological peculiarities of Greek. This has led some linguists to propose a hypothetically closer relationship between Greek and Armenian, although evidence remains scant. Proto-Greek speakers are mostly placed in the early Hellenic period, i.e., towards the end of the European Neolithic. Russell Gray and Quentin Atkinson in a 2003 paper using computational methods on Swadesh lists have arrived at a somewhat earlier estimate, around 5000 BC for Greco-Armenian split, and the emergence of Greek as a separate linguistic lineage around 4000 BC. Mycenaean in circa 1600 BC. The Mycenaean Greeks borrowed from the Minoan civilization its syllabic writing system and developed their own syllabic script known as Linear B, providing the first and oldest written evidence of Greek. The Mycenaeans quickly penetrated the Aegean Sea and, by the 15th century BC, had reached Rhodes, Crete, Cyprus and the shores of Asia Minor. Around 1200 BC, the Dorians, another Greek-speaking people, followed from Epirus. Traditionally, historians have believed that the Dorian invasion caused the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization, but it is likely the main attack was made by seafaring raiders who sailed into the eastern Mediterranean around 1180 BC. The Dorian invasion was followed by a poorly attested period of migrations, appropriately called the Greek Dark Ages. But by 800 BC the landscape of archaic and classical Greece was discernible. The Greeks of classical antiquity idealized the Mycenaean ancestors in the Mycenaean period as a glorious era of heroes, closeness of the gods and material wealth. The Homeric epics were especially and generally accepted as part of the Greek past, and it was not until the 19th century that scholars began to question Homer's historicity as part of the Mycenaean heritage that survived. The names of the gods and goddesses of Mycenaean Greece became major figures of the Olympian pantheon of later antiquity. Classical, the ethnogenesis of the Greek nation is linked to the development of Pan-Hellenism in the 8th century BC. According to some scholars, the foundational event was the Olympic Games in 776 BC, when the idea of a common Hellenism among the Greek tribes was first translated into a shared cultural experience, and Hellenism was primarily a matter of common culture. The works of Homer and Hesiod were written in the 8th century BC, becoming the basis of the national religion, ethos, history and mythology. The Oracle of Apollo at Delphi was established in this period. The classical period of Greek civilization covers a time spanning from the early 5th century BC to the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC. It is so named because it set the standards by which Greek civilization would be judged in later eras. The classical period is also described as the Golden Age of Greek civilization, and its art, philosophy, architecture and literature would be instrumental in the formation and development of Western culture, while the Greeks of the classical era understood themselves to belong to a common Hellenic genos. The first loyalty was to the city, and they saw nothing incongruous about warring, or often brutally, with other Greek city-states. The Peloponnesian War, the large-scale civil war between the two most powerful Greek city-states, Athens and Sparta, and their allies, left both greatly weakened. Most of the feuding Greek city-states were, in some scholars' opinions, united under the banner of Philip's and Alexander the Great's pan-Hellenic ideals, though others might generally opt, rather, for an explanation of Macedonian conquest for the sake of conquest, or at least conquest for the sake of riches, glory and power, and view the ideal as useful propaganda directed towards the city-states. In any case, Alexander's toppling of the Achaemenid Empire, after his victories at the battles of the Granicus, Issus and Gaugamela, and his advance as far as modern-day Pakistan and Tajikistan, provided an important outlet for Greek culture, via the creation of colonies and trade routes along the way. While the Alexandrian Empire did not survive its creator's death intact, the cultural implications of the spread of Hellenism across much of the Middle East and Asia were to prove long-lived as Greek became the lingua franca, a position it retained even in Roman times. Many Greeks settled in Hellenistic cities like Alexandria, Antioch and Seleucia. 2,000 years later, there are still communities in Pakistan and Afghanistan, like the Kalash, who claim to be descended from Greek settlers. The Hellenistic civilization was the next period of Greek civilization, the beginnings of which are usually placed at Alexander's death. This Hellenistic age, so called because it saw the partial Hellenization of many non-Greek cultures, lasted until the conquest of Egypt by Rome in 30 BC. This age saw the Greeks move towards larger cities and a reduction in the importance of the city-state. These larger cities were parts of the still larger kingdoms of the Diadochi. Greeks, however, remained aware of the past, chiefly through the study of the works of Homer and the classical authors. An important factor in maintaining Greek identity was contact with barbarian peoples, which was deepened in the new cosmopolitan environment of the multi-ethnic Hellenistic kingdoms. This led to a strong desire among Greeks to organize the transmission of the Hellenic potier to the next generation. Greek science, technology and mathematics are generally considered to have reached the peak during the Hellenistic period. In the Indo-Greek Greek and Greco-Bactrian kingdoms. Greco-Buddhism was spreading and Greek missionaries would play an important role in propagating it to China. Further east, the Greeks of Alexandria it became known to the Chinese people as the Daean Roman Empire following the time of the conquest of the last of the independent Greek city-states and Hellenistic kingdoms. Almost all of the world's Greek speakers lived as citizens or subjects of the Roman Empire. Despite the military superiority the Romans had made and became heavily influenced by the achievements of Greek culture. Hence Horace's famous statement, Graecia capt ferrum victorum cepit. In the religious sphere, this was a period of profound change. The spiritual revolution that took place saw a waning of the old Greek religion, whose decline beginning in the 3rd century BC continued with the introduction of new religious movements from the East. The cults of deities like Isis and Mithra were introduced into the Greek world. Greek-speaking communities of the Hellenized East were instrumental in the spread of early Christianity in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, and Christianity's early leaders and writers were generally Greek-speaking, though none were from Greece. However, Greece itself had a tendency to cling to paganism and was not one of the influential centers of early Christianity. In fact, some ancient Greek religious practices remained in vogue until the end of the 4th century, with some areas such as the southeastern Peloponnese remaining pagan until well into the 10th century AD. Byzantine Empire. Of the new Eastern religions introduced into the Greek world, the most successful was Christianity. From the early centuries of the Common Era, the Greeks self-identified as Romaioi, as well as Graikoi. By that time, the name Hellenes denoted pagans but was revived as an ethnonym in the 11th century. While ethnic distinctions still existed in the Roman Empire, they became secondary to religious considerations, and the renewed empire used Christianity as a tool to support its cohesion and promoted a robust Roman national identity. Concurrently, the secular, urban civilization of late antiquity survived in the Eastern Mediterranean along with the Greco-Roman educational system, the Greeks' essential. The values were drawn from both Christianity and the Homeric tradition of the classical ancestors. The Eastern Roman Empire became increasingly influenced by Greek culture after the 7th century, when Emperor Heraclius decided to make Greek the empire's official language. Certainly from then on, but likely earlier, the Greek and Roman cultures were virtually fused into a single Greco-Roman world. Although the Latin West recognized the Eastern Empire's claim to the Roman legacy for several centuries, after Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne, king of the Franks, as the Roman Emperor on the 25th of December 800, an act which eventually led to the formation of the Holy Roman Empire. The Latin West started to favor the Franks and began to refer to the Eastern Roman Empire largely as the Empire of the Greeks. These Byzantine Greeks were largely responsible for the preservation of the literature of the classical era. Byzantine grammarians were those principally responsible for carrying, in person and in writing, ancient Greek grammatical and literary studies to the West during the 15th century, giving the Italian Renaissance a major boost. The Aristotelian philosophical tradition was nearly unbroken in the Greek world for almost 2,000 years, until the fall of Constantinople in 1453. To the Slavic world, Roman-era Greeks contributed by the dissemination of literacy and Christianity. The most notable example of the latter was the work of the two Byzantine Greek brothers, the monks Saints Cyril and Methodius from the port city of Thessalonica in Greek Macedonia, who are credited today with formalizing the first Slavic alphabet. A distinct Greek political identity re-emerged in the 11th century in education educated circles and became more forceful after the fall of Constantinople too. The Crusaders of the Fourth Crusade in 1204, so that when the empire was revived in 1261, it became in many ways a Greek national state. The new notion of nationhood engendered a deep interest in the classical past, culminating in the ideas of the Neoplatonist philosopher Gemistus Pletha, who abandoned Christianity. However, it was the combination of Orthodox Christianity with a specifically Greek identity that shaped the Greeks' notion of themselves in the empire's twilight years. The interest in the classical Greek heritage was complemented by a renewed emphasis on Greek Orthodox identity, which was reinforced in the late medieval and Ottoman Greeks' links with the fellow Orthodox Christians in the Russian Empire. These were further strengthened following the fall of the Empire of Trebizond in 1461, after which and until the Second Russo-Turkish War of 1828-29 hundreds of thousands of Pontic Greeks fled or migrated from the Pontic Alps and Armenian highlands to southern Russia and the Russian South Caucasus. Ottoman Empire. Following the fall of Constantinople on the 29th of May 1453, many Greeks sought better employment and education opportunities by leaving for the West, particularly Italy, Central Europe, Germany and Russia. Greeks are greatly credited for the European Cultural Revolution, later called the Renaissance. In Greek-inhabited territory itself, Greeks came to play a leading role in the Ottoman Empire, due in part to the fact that the central hub of the empire, politically, culturally and socially, was based on Western Thrace and Greek Macedonia, both in northern Greece, and of course was centered on the mainly Greek-populated, former Byzantine capital, Constantinople. As a direct consequence of this situation, Greek speakers came to play a hugely important role in the Ottoman trading and diplomatic establishment, as well as in the church. Added to this, in the first half of the Ottoman period, men of Greek origin made up a significant proportion of the Ottoman army, navy, and state bureaucracy, having been levied as adolescents into Ottoman service through the Devshirme. Many Ottomans of Greek origin were therefore to be found within the Ottoman forces which governed the provinces, from Ottoman Egypt. 2 Ottomans occupied Yemen and Algeria, frequently as provincial governors. For those that remained under the Ottoman Empire's millet system, religion was the defining characteristic of national groups, so the exonym Greeks was applied by the Ottomans to all members of the Orthodox Church, regardless of the language or ethnic origin. The Greek speakers were the only ethnic group to actually call themselves Romiwa, and, at least those educated, considered their ethnicity to be Hellenic. There were, however, many Greeks who escaped the second-class status of Christians inherent in the Ottoman millet system, according to which Muslims were explicitly awarded senior status and preferential treatment. These Greeks either emigrated, particularly to the fellow Greek Orthodox protector, the Russian Empire, or simply converted to Islam, often only very superficially and whilst remaining crypto-Christian. The most notable examples of large-scale conversion to Turkish Islam among those today defined as Greek Muslims, excluding those who had to convert, as a matter of course on being recruited through the Devshirme, were to be found in Crete, Greek Macedonia, and among Pontic Greeks in the Pontic Alps and Armenian highlands. Several Ottoman sultans and princes were also of part Greek origin, with mothers who were either Greek concubines or princesses from Byzantine noble families, one famous example being Sultan Selim the Grim, whose mother Gulbahar Hatun was a Pontic Greek. The roots of Greek success in the Ottoman Empire can be traced to the Greek tradition of education and commerce exemplified in the Phanariots. It was the wealth of the extensive merchant class that provided the material basis for the intellectual revival that was the prominent feature of Greek life in the half-century and more, leading to the outbreak of the Greek War of Independence in 1821. Not coincidentally, on the eve of 1821, the three most important centers of Greek learning were situated in Chios, Smyrna and Ivali, all three major centers of Greek commerce. Greek's success was also favored by Greek domination of the Christian Orthodox Church. The relationship between ethnic Greek identity and Greek Orthodox religion continued after the creation of the modern Greek nation-state in 1830. According to the second article of the first Greek constitution of 1822, a Greek was defined as any native Christian resident of the Kingdom of Greece, a clause removed by 1840. A century later, when the Treaty of Lausanne was signed between Greece and Turkey in 1923, the two countries agreed to use religion as the determinant for ethnic identity for the purposes of population exchange. Although most of the Greeks displaced had already been driven out by the time the agreement was signed, the Greek genocide, in particular the harsh removal of Parthian Greeks from the southern shore area of the Black Sea, contemporaneous with and following the failed Greek Asia Minor campaign, was part of this process of Turkification of the Ottoman Empire and the placement of its economy and trade, then largely in Greek hands under ethnic Turkish control. While most Greeks today are descended from Greek-speaking Romiwa Grekoi, there are sizable groups of ethnic Greeks who trace the descent to Aromanian-speaking Vlachs, Albanian-speaking Arvanites, Slavophones, Armenians, Georgians, and Turkish-speaking Karamanlides. Today, Greeks are to be found all around the world.